application, when you have to connect to an other application, you will only use the first step, so you will be directly connected. So LemonLDAP is a single sign-in product, but it is also an access control product, which means that before accessing to your web application, we have an authorization step. So you can see here that the first step is to connect to the web application, but you are intercepted by the single sign-on software. And in the second step, we will check your authorizations. We'll check if you really have the right to access to the web application, and if you have the right, of course, you can access to the web application. So LemonLDAP is written in Perl and has a lot of components. All components are using the common components, and we have 3 main components. The first is the manager, which is an administration interface. You can configure all the settings of LemonLDAP with this manager, with this graphical interface. You can also configure LemonLDAP with text files or command lines. The portal is the visible part of LemonLDAP because all user interactions are done on the portal. And you can log in with the portal, you can change the password with the portal, etc. And the last component is the handler, which is the single sign-on agent, which is today an Apache handler. So it will intercept all HTTP requests and do single sign-on on access control. If we take a big topic, you can see here all the kinematic of the single sign-on protocol. So you see that at the first step we try to access to a web application, but the handler intercepts the request and redirects on the portal, so we can authenticate. And you see that in step 4 and 5 we authenticate on our user database, which can be an LDAP directory or any other database. We collect some data that we store in a session backend, and we give the session key in step 8 inside a cookie, which is registered inside user browser. So the user is then redirected to the web application, and now we have a cookie and a session key, and the handler is able to find the session in the session backend and can do 2 things. The first is to say, okay, this user is authenticated, and then he can give to the application some data inside HTTP headers. That's step 12. And then the user can access to the web application. So LemonLDAP supports a lot of authentication backends. The main are LDAP authentication or database authentication, but you can see that we support SAML, Radius, CAS, OpenID, and of course all of all social networks like Twitter, Facebook, and Google. We also support WebID, which is the authentication protocol from W3C, and also the UBK, which is a simple one-time password token. LemonLDAP is very modular, so you can implement your own authentication backend if you need it. LemonLDAP is also a self-service software because we offer to the users a lot of services like password change, which means if the user needs to change its password, he can access to the portal and change its password. But we can also give access to a password reset page, which means if the user lost his password, he can enter his emails and get a link, and then he's able to change its password without knowing the former password. And the last service is the login history. the user will be able to see all the previous login, the failed login on the success login. LemonLDAP is a single sign-on software, but we do not implement our own protocol. We are just implementing standard protocol. So you can see here that the main protocols that are implemented in LemonLDAP are OpenID, CAS, and SAML. There are 3 very different protocols, but they are used in many applications. The simplest protocol is the CAS, which is a simple token which is exchanged through HTTP redirections. Then you have OpenID, which allows you to choose your identity provider by entering the URL of the identity provider. And then the last, SAML, is a very complex protocol, security-based, and which allows to do authentication through XML secured messages. What is important here is that LemonLDAP can be a gateway between these protocols, because we implement the authentication part, the client part, and also the issuer part. So we can be as a service provider, and we can be the identity provider. For example, you can have an application, a web application, which knows the CAS protocol, so we can do a CAS request to LemonLDAP. So LemonLDAP will act as a CAS server, and then LemonLDAP can use SAML to authenticate the user to the SAML identity provider, which means the user can access to a CAS protected application through the SAML protocol authentication. So let's talk about some new feature of the last version. The first big feature is Bootstrap Skin. Bootstrap is a CSS framework made by Twitter, and it allows to have first a clean page, and then to be responsive. The responsive is very important for us because a lot of users now use their web application on their tablets or their mobile phone. So they must use the authentication part also on tablets and mobile phone. You can see here two screenshots. The first is a screenshot of the interface on a standard laptop screen, and then you can see another screenshot made on a mobile device. So you can see that all the fields fit to the screen size. Second big new feature is a self-register service. So it's a new self-service proposed by LemonLDAP, which allows a user which do not have already an account on the single sign-on software to create an account. This is very easy. You will fill a form with your first name, last name, and email. Then you will get an email with a link to validate the request, and this link will generate a login and a password, and this login and password will be sent through email to the user. So with this simple service, you can offer a single sign-on service to users who are not yet registered in your database. It's very, very easy now to propose single sign-on on public services with this. A little more technical slide. We use Perl as a development language, and we use now a new module which is called mouse, like a mouse. And we made a lot of development with this module. So you can see that configuration attribute, sessions, handler, and captcha now use this module, which is a high-level object-oriented module. This have no really impact on users, but for developers, the code is much cleaner, and it allows to do more things. For example, you can see that we manage CAPTCHA, which allows to put CAPTCHA on a login form or a reset password form. And now with the rewriting of this module, we can use CAPTCHA in cluster mode. So it means that you can have a CAPTCHA shared by many servers. So you can use a CAPTCHA and check the CAPTCHA in cluster mode. A small point about security. We offer now the choice of the generation of the session identifier. The session identifier is a session key that is exported inside the cookie inside the browser, and we know that if the session identifier is big, it will be more difficult to brute force the session identifier. So by default, the session identifier was MD5, an MD5 generation identifier, and you can now use SHA-256 to generate your session identifier, which gives you a much robust identifier. So you can use it. And next step, next feature is about SAML. SAML is a standard single sign-on protocol, and by default, to be able to sign in with the SAML protocol, you need 3 steps. The first step was to contact the service provider, which redirects you to the identity provider, and the first step was to get back to the service provider. In the standard SAML, you have a new profile, which is called the SAML IDP SSO initiated, which allows only to have 2 steps. So you can connect to the identity provider and say that you want to log in to a specific service provider. You can see that we have a specific key in the URL. And with this profile, you will be able to log directly in service provider without having a first request to the service provider. So this is now possible with LemonLDAP. And to conclude this presentation, a small word about Nginx. As I said previously, LemonLDAP is embedded in the Apache Web Server, and we are now working on the Nginx support. But for now, we wrote a specific handler in Lua, which is the main scripting language in Nginx. This handler works perfectly and is available on GitHub. And we are now working on the Perl implementation, because we would like to keep a Perl code base. But the Perl interface of Nginx is not mature enough, so we are working with the Nginx community to be able to release this Perl handler. So thanks for your attention. As a conclusion, I will give some links if you want to stay tuned to LemonLDAP, so you can get some information on our website. We have on our IRC channel, we have mailing list, and you have all the social media to get to stay informed. So please don't hesitate to reach us with these tools. And special thanks to OW2 staff and the team and my society, Linagora.